Let's move on. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened to Manchester United last night. Daniel Harris is with us this morning. Daniel, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. You're right.
What's your memory of the ball moving in 1996 in the Euros when Gary McAllister misses a penalty against David Seaman?
It was a big thing in England at the time because obviously it was the Euro 96. It was in England. Like the tabloid hype was in overdrive. So anything about the football, they were splashing all over the place. So actually, I think that it's become part of the folklore rather than, I guess, it probably wasn't something that you guys were so excited about. But I would say that anyone who was old enough to remember Euro 96 probably remembers Uri Geller saying that he made the ball move.
But and the ball definitely moved. There's no doubts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he definitely tried to make it move. So 1 + 1 = 2.
I mean, that's how life works, right? That's definitely...
Yeah.
If you were James Horan and you see this, like in the way that we've been talking about, if you're Jim Gavin, you kind of have to ask Rory O'Carroll and Diarmuid Connolly to at least come in for a training session. Do you, if you're James Horan, have to take Uri Geller up on his offer just in case 100%. There's something you don't know?
100% you do. If James Horan isn't on a plane to Tel Aviv right now, I'll be highly disappointed.
All right, let's go back to the real world, and it was a bit of a real world experience for Manchester United last night. This is going to happen. There's definitely going to be setbacks. It's just whether or not they can manage the setbacks over the course of the next 18 months to the point where everybody kind of feels like they're constantly being propelled forward under Solskjaer.
Yeah, I think so. I think in the end, his time as manager is going to be defined by whether he buys the right players this summer. I think that we're starting to see that where he thinks the players need to be bought, that he dropped Matic and Herrera last night. And I think that was quite cheering as a United supporter, because you hear all sorts of rumours about he wants a right back, he wants a centre back, whereas I think very clear to me and the people that I go and watch United with that the midfield is the thing that needs addressing. I think that's really what we saw last night. I wouldn't particularly blame Solskjaer for the result. I felt like he was much more culpable when United got beaten in the Cup because he rushed back too many players from injury. There was no apparent plan that had been communicated, whereas last night United started quite well. They got the early goal. And they then missed a series of chances that if you play a good team, they won't let you get away with that. And Wolves are a good team. And you could see that after Lingard missed that header for 2-0, where it almost felt like he completely bricked it because it was just so easy. Just the chance that he had, Wolves came into the game, and Wolves are a good team. And I also think they're a really bad matchup for United. Because if you watch the way United have been playing under Solskjaer, he knows that they can't dominate midfield. So what they do is they defend, and then when they get the opportunity, they counter at pace and they get men forward. Against Wolves, you don't really get the opportunity to do that because they sit quite deep themselves and they have quite a slow possession-heavy style, which works really well for them. They play the same way in every game, so they have players that are really settled. And so once they got into their groove last night, they played pretty well. And the way that the two teams match up is not good for United. And I felt like, in the end, you can't, same as against Arsenal, really, you can't get away with missing the quantity of the quality of chances that United had and expect to get anything out of the game against the team that know what they're doing.
This is seemingly a fairly huge job now in terms of recruitment, in terms of shoring up that defence. I mean, you look at Smalling and Jones, you look at Ashley Young last night. Are they three players straight away that need to be replaced? And they're three big money signings, you'd imagine, if you want to get some sort of talent that's going to be able to challenge for a title next season?
Not really. If I was looking at this team, I do look at this team and think, what do I think needs to be done with it? If you allowed me 3 players, I would buy 2 midfield players and a winger. And I think the lack of a right side has been a problem for years. I don't think United have signed the right winger since Wilfried Zaha, and that's been a problem for years. And you can see it when they attack, how unbalanced they are. But what's really holding United back is the inability to dominate the ball against even middling teams. So against Watford, against Leicester, they're struggling to dominate midfield. And I think if you saw that, then you would see the defence having to do a lot less. Smalling and Jones, Jones didn't start last night, but was probably United's best player against Watford at the weekend. Smalling, actually, and Lindelof, I thought, played okay last night until the own goal when they started to get a bit more panicky. So I think that if you gave Smalling and if you gave the amount of work that United centre-backs have to do to Stones and Laporte, I think you would find that City would concede a lot more goals. The reason City don't concede very many goals is because the opposition can't get the ball because their midfield is so good. I think that United's defence, you could get another year out of United's defence and put in a challenge for the title if you got the right signings in the other positions. Whereas if you went and found a centre-back, two new centre-backs, I think you'd still struggle with the same problem, that you wouldn't be able to dominate the game and your defence would have to do a lot. And when your defence has to do a lot of defending, you're more likely to see errors from the defenders. And as far as the right-back goes, of all the players in United's team, one of the ones who appears to have the best mentality, who doesn't shrink, who imposes himself, is Diogo Dalot. And he probably isn't ready to be a full-time right-back, but I would definitely not be particularly into signing someone to go ahead of him, because he looks like he has the right stuff. So what I would hope they would do next season is that they would kind of have an interregnum where Young does a bit and Dalot does a bit, so that Dalot's ready to go full-time the following season. They might look at it and think, well, if they can get Wan-Bissaka and they can afford him, then perhaps they might think that he's too good not to have. But I would say the priorities are absolutely not in defence, and they're midfield and on the right wing.
What do you make of the possibility that maybe Pogba goes and you use that money to buy a bunch of younger players? Is this team, do you need to keep Pogba and build around him, or do you need to take the opportunity to say, okay, we've re-established your value on a global scale, Real Madrid are interested, you seem to be interested when you're on international duty and talking about Real Madrid, off you go, it's going to cost a lot of money for them, they can pay it, we'll take it and we'll move on?
I see both sides of that. The thing with Pogba is Pogba's a brilliant talent. I mean, anyone that doesn't think that doesn't really understand football, but he's unreliable. He's not someone that you can rely on to play well in all the games and to elevate you when necessary. And I also wonder about Pogba, and we're getting ahead of ourselves here to an extent because United aren't anywhere close to this, but I also wonder if you can be the very best team if you have a player like Pogba, because unless he's prepared to put in a bit more work, it's quite a struggle to balance what he brings with what he doesn't bring. So if he's not running around sufficiently, then he sort of needs to deliver the number of goals and assists that you would expect from a number 10. And when you play with a number 10, if you actually the best number 10, someone like Wayne Rooney, you're looking at 20 goals and 10, 15 assists. And I wonder if Pogba's ever going to be able to deliver that. So on the one hand, if you want to progress, getting rid of your best outfield player doesn't sound like a very sensible option. On the other hand, if he's going to run down his contract and put in the standard of effort that he put in last night, then you're probably best selling him now before he's got a year left and reinvesting the money, except then you need 3 midfield players and you need to gel a whole new midfield together and with the players in front of them. So it's complicated, but he definitely played last night like someone who wouldn't mind being somewhere else.
It's only complicated if they're not wedded to Solskjaer for the long term. If they've given him a sense that okay, it's not that you're allowed to have a down year, but we understand that there will be a period of transition, and it's not that you're coming in with the express instructions of winning the league the way Mourinho would essentially have been told. You're going to win the league because you always win the league. Or the Champions League, or at least make us relevant. For Solskjaer, there should be, at least from the ownership, a sense that, well, he's inherited an absolute mess and he's taken the team to the brink of qualification for the Champions League when that looked absolutely hopeless. So if we are going to sell Pogba and not replace him with a like-for-like world-class player, maybe we're going to sign 3 players at a lower rate who one of them might become, or 2 of them might become what Pogba is in the future. That's going to take time.
It does take. It might take time. I mean, it doesn't always work like that, because if you had like let's say you sell Pogba for 120 million quid, you could go and buy 2 £60 million players with that, or one £80 million player, and one £40 million player. If you pay £80 million for a player, like I don't know if this is true. So like, I mean, I'm kind of I'm not making it up, but I read that people think that you could get Saul from Atletico Madrid for 80 million quid. If you went and did that deal, then you would expect him to come in and be good pretty much straight away, because he's a really good player. So you don't necessarily have to pay all that money to spend all that money on one player to get someone good. You could put that, let's say you sold Pogba, you would expect to be able to get 2 good players who would come in and actually perform for what you paid for Pogba. But I think that Solskjaer, provided that there is the sense of hope that you're going somewhere, then he will get time. And if you look at the managers that got fired, Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, they went when it became clear that it wasn't going anywhere good. As long as people felt that that things were improving, then they were allowed to continue. And I actually felt that all of them probably got a bit longer than they should have done. But it's when you run out of hope that these people get fired. So as long as United are improving, then Solskjaer will be able to stay in the job. So if you were to sell Pogba and go and buy 3 midfield players, then you would expect to see something different through the course of next season. That you wouldn't necessarily start firing, although you would hope to, but provided there was progress during the season, and I think people would be happy with that. And if you look at what Solskjaer has done so far and what we've seen from him, the thing that we don't know is about the players that he might buy. But we've seen him alter his tactics before games. We've seen him alter his tactics during games. We've seen him get the team scoring goals. We've seen him defending improve. We've seen him motivate the players. We've seen quite a lot of elements that you would expect to see in a manager. So as long as you keep seeing those kinds of things, then people are going to be patient. And I think so far he was getting the maximum from the team for a period of time. Now the level has dropped slightly, the level of the finishing in particular has dropped slightly, and that's the difference. This is a team that isn't good enough to win games on a string one after the other against good teams without things going their way and without everyone playing well. And now that the team playing less well, you've seen a drop in results, and I don't think that most of that you would look at it and say, well, actually, he's got the tactics wrong, he's not motivating the players. You look at it and say, the players aren't doing what the players need to be doing.
You touched on Paul Pogba's attitude last night. I wonder if Paul Pogba wasn't the best outfield player at Manchester United, would we see a complete change in his attitude? Like, I mean, Jose Mourinho's story from his coaching conference in Portugal recently, that he drove home from Burnley in his Rolls Royce while everybody else was in the team bus, suggests a player that may think he's superior to everybody else in the squad and deserves preferential treatment.
Do we know that was definitely him? Was that definitely Pogba? Someone suggested to me in the car yesterday that it might be Memphis, because he seemed to have better knowledge of United's players' car driving arrangements than I did. I don't know, but I do. I mean, it's possible that you would put Pogba in Real Madrid, and then he would suddenly think, well, actually, I need to pull my finger out here because I'm not the best player here. But Real Madrid also need a fairly significant rebuild, so I'm not certain that he would go over there and suddenly start dominating games, because at the moment, I don't really think he's that kind of player. I think that perhaps he could be that kind of player, but he isn't that kind of player at the moment. We saw a bit more of it for France, but I think Mourinho was right to point out that it's different when you're playing a very small number of games in a very focused period of time, focused on a particular goal. I don't think he was particularly right to say it in public when he said it, but I don't think it was an unfair point to make, that the circumstances of the World Cup are specific, and for Pogba to deliver what he delivered in the World Cup didn't necessarily mean that he would then come and deliver that through a season. But Pogba is a difficult character, and I compare him to Steven Gerrard, and although he lacks a lot of Gerrard's competitive charisma and drive, they're quite similar in that if you look at Gerrard through his career at Liverpool, he was a guy who tended not to control games, but who settled many games. And the two managers that got the most out of the team and he got the most out of him were Gerard Houllier and Rafa Benitez. And Houllier played Gerrard on the right wing a lot of the time, and Benitez played him behind Fernando Torres, because with these players there's a quid pro quo. Similarly, Frank Lampard wouldn't have got all those goals if he'd have had to do more defending than he did, if he hadn't have had Makelele behind him for half his career. And when you have these players who have particular talents when it comes to scoring goals, you have to find a way of balancing the team around them. And I think that Gerrard and Lampard give you more of an engine and more commitment often than you get from Pogba, who has probably a slightly better short game than both of them, I would say, but he's not delivering the numbers that they delivered at their best, which makes him a problem.
Daniel, great stuff. Thanks a million.
No, I'll see you again.
Daniel Harris giving us some thoughts there on what happened last night and also the cultural significance of the moving Gary McAllister ball.